My name is Dana, and I'm 34 years old. I was just buying a birthday gift for my daughter when the cashier suddenly grabbed my hand and whispered, "Don't go there tonight." It was one of those late evenings when the city felt both alive and hollow at the same time. I had just left work, my brain foggy from overtime spreadsheets and unanswered emails, and I remembered I still hadn't picked up a gift for Mia's birthday. My little girl was turning 8 tomorrow, and she'd been talking for weeks about a dollhouse she saw in the commercials. I couldn't disappoint her, not after missing her school play last month. The toy store was nearly empty when I walked in. Soft music played overhead, the kind that's meant to calm restless kids. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly, flickering every so often. I grabbed the dollhouse from the shelf, relieved to see it was the last one in stock. It felt like a small victory, like the universe was cutting me a break for once. The cashier was a young woman barely out of her 20s. Her name tag read Clara. She smiled weakly when I approached the counter, though there was something off about her eyes. They darted toward the windows every few seconds, like she expected someone to come through the door. As she scanned the box, her hands trembled slightly. I tried to make small talk, mentioning how my daughter was obsessed with these kinds of toys. Clara nodded absently, her gaze flicking toward the parking lot again. When I reached for my wallet, she suddenly grabbed my hand. Her fingers were cold, ice cold. My heart jumped. I looked at her, confused. Her lips barely moved when she whispered, "Don't go there tonight." At first, I thought I misheard her. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" I asked, half laughing, waiting for her to explain. But Clara's expression shifted instantly. She forced a smile and shook her head as if nothing had happened. "Cash or card?" she said, her tone perfectly normal, though her eyes were still wide with something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe. I hesitated. The air around us felt heavier now, like the store had shrunk around me. "Did you just say?" She cut me off. "It's $79.99, she said sharply. Something about her tone told me not to press further. I paid, trying to shake the unease crawling up my spine. When she handed me the receipt, her hand brushed mine again, deliberately this time. She mouthed something, but I couldn't catch it. "Have a good night," she said quickly, almost pushing the bag toward me. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face, grounding me. I glanced back through the glass, and Clara was standing there, frozen, watching me leave. My pulse was racing as I walked to my car. "Don't go there tonight." What did that even mean? Go where? Was it a prank? A warning? Maybe she mistook me for someone else? I sat behind the wheel for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of it. It didn't. None of it did. Just then, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text message flashed on the screen. It was from Harper, my best friend since college. "See you tonight at the new restaurant on Lakeview Road. 7 sharp. Don't be late like last time." My chest tightened. Lakeview Road. That was where the Lantern House had just opened, a fancy restaurant everyone had been raving about. I stared at the text, then at the store window. Clara was gone. Outside, I received a text from my best friend saying, "See you tonight at the new restaurant on Lakeview Road." The exact place I'd planned to go. My heart raced as I realized the cashier's warning might have been about the restaurant. I sat in the car, gripping my phone like it was some sort of lifeline. The text from Harper glowed on the screen, bright and harmless. Yet it made my stomach twist into knots. The new restaurant on Lakeview Road. That had to be what Clara meant. But why would she warn me not to go there? What could possibly be wrong with a restaurant? I tried to laugh it off, convincing myself I was being ridiculous. Maybe Clara was talking about somewhere else entirely. Maybe she wasn't even talking to me. Still, the way she'd grabbed my hand, the coldness of her skin, the panic in her eyes, it wasn't something I could brush aside easily. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every red light made my thoughts spiral further. By the time I parked in my driveway, my mind was buzzing with questions. I stepped out of the car and stared at the darkening sky. It was only 6:15. If I left soon, I could still make dinner with Harper. But should I? Inside, the warmth of the house wrapped around me like a blanket. The smell of apple-scented candles and the faint hum of Mia's cartoons brought me back to normal life. My daughter was sprawled across the living room rug, coloring in one of her princess books. She looked up with that gap-toothed grin of hers that could melt any bad day. "Mommy, did you get it?" she asked eagerly. I smiled and held up the bag. "I sure did. But you can't peek until tomorrow, birthday girl." She pouted dramatically, then went back to coloring. For a moment, I forgot all about the warning. Watching her so happy made me feel foolish for letting a stranger's whisper get under my skin. I went into the kitchen and checked my phone again. Harper had sent another message. "They say the chef used to work for a Michelin star restaurant. This place is supposed to be amazing." I sighed. Harper and I had a tradition of meeting once a month for dinner, no matter how busy life got. The last time we met, she told me she'd been feeling lonely since her divorce. I didn't want to disappoint her again. I opened my laptop and searched the Lantern House Lakeview Road reviews. Dozens of 5-star comments popped up, people raving about the food, the service, the ambiance, no complaints, no bad press, nothing remotely suspicious. "See? You're just being paranoid," I muttered to myself. Still, when I looked closer at one of the review photos, something made my breath catch. In the reflection of a wine glass, there was a blurry figure, someone standing behind the bar, staring directly into the camera. The same piercing eyes. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like Clara. I blinked and shook my head. "No way," I whispered. Maybe it was someone who just looked like her. My mind was clearly working overtime. Just then my phone rang. It was Harper again. "Hey, you on your way?" she asked cheerfully. "Yeah, just about." I lied. "How's the place?" "It's beautiful," she said. "Candlelight, live music. You'll love it." Her voice faded for a moment, then came back slightly muffled, like she'd covered the phone. "Oh, hang on a sec, I think someone's trying to get my attention." "Harper?" The line went silent for a few seconds before she laughed softly. "Sorry, weird moment. Anyway, hurry up, okay?" When we hung up, that uneasy feeling returned stronger than ever. Something didn't feel right. I poured myself a glass of water, but before I could take a sip, my phone buzzed again, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A soft, trembling voice whispered on the other end. "Please, don't ignore her warning." The line went dead. That night, I got a strange call from an unknown number, a woman whispering, "Please, don't ignore her warning." The mysterious voice on the phone repeated, "Don't go to the Lantern House," before the line went dead. For several seconds, I just sat there in silence, my hand frozen mid-air, the phone still pressed to my ear. I could hear my own breathing, shaky, shallow, uneven. The line was completely dead. No static, no tone. Just emptiness. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the dark screen. "Don't go to the Lantern House." The words replayed over and over in my head like a broken record. It couldn't be a coincidence. First the cashier, now this. 2 separate warnings from 2 different voices about the same place. Something was happening, and I was caught in the middle of it. I checked the call log, but the number didn't exist. Literally, when I tried to redial, my phone flashed invalid number. A chill ran down my spine. I looked at the time. 6:47 p.m. Harper was probably already sitting at the restaurant, expecting me to walk in any minute. I had less than 15 minutes to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore everything, show up, and prove that my paranoia was just that, paranoia. But the other part of me, the quiet voice deep inside that rarely spoke, whispered that I'd regret it if I went. I paced my kitchen, glancing between my phone and the clock. Maybe Harper could leave with me early if something felt off. Maybe I could check it out and be cautious. I was still debating when I noticed a faint vibration on the counter. My phone again, but this time it was a notification from a local news app. Breaking: power outages reported near Lakeview Road area due to transformer malfunction. My throat tightened. Lakeview Road. The same area where the Lantern House was. I turned on the TV, switching to the local channel. But there was no mention of anything serious, just a few lights flickering in nearby neighborhoods. Still, something about the timing didn't sit right with me. Unable to shake the dread, I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. I searched the Lantern House accidents, Lantern House crime, restaurant owner Lakeview. Nothing came up. Every search led to glossy photos and smiling customers. The website was spotless, almost too spotless, like it had been curated to hide anything unflattering. Harper texted again. "Are you on your way? I got us a window seat. You'll love the view." I stared at the message, hesitating to type. My fingers hovered above the keyboard before I finally replied. "Something came up. Might be a bit late. Save me a seat." Then I shut the laptop, grabbed my keys, and decided to do something impulsive: drive past the restaurant. I wasn't going to go inside, just see it for myself. Maybe that would calm me down. The road to Lakeview was quiet, lined with flickering streetlights and dense trees on both sides. The deeper I drove, the darker it became. I passed a few diners, a gas station, then finally, I saw it: the restaurant. The Lantern House. It was beautiful from the outside, glowing softly with golden lights and elegant windows. Couples laughed on the patio, a musician played guitar near the door, and everything looked perfectly normal. My heart began to slow. Maybe I had overreacted. I parked across the street for a few minutes, watching. Nothing strange, no sign of trouble. Maybe Clara was just an anxious woman having a bad day. Maybe the call was a prank. I laughed quietly to myself, starting the car again. That's when I noticed something odd: a faint smell in the air, like smoke. I rolled down the window. There was no fire, no visible smoke anywhere, but the scent was strong, like burned wood. Later that night, when I finally went to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I dreamed I was standing in front of the Lantern House again, only this time, the windows were blackened, flames licking the sky, and people were screaming from inside. I woke up gasping, my nightshirt damp with sweat. My first thought was that it had to be a nightmare. But then I saw it: ash smeared along my bedroom windowsill, fine and gray, like something had burned outside in the night. When I woke, there was ash smeared on my windowsill, though it hadn't rained or snowed. I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something or someone was trying to warn me. The next morning, I stood by my window, staring at the faint traces of ash that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just dust, it was too dark, too specific. I wiped some onto my finger. It was gritty, like soot. My neighborhood was quiet. The street as ordinary as ever. No burned trash cans, no sign of a fire, nothing. And yet the smell of smoke still lingered faintly in the air, mixed with the sharp chill of dawn. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe a neighbor lit a fire pit. Maybe wind carried it here. Anything was better than believing that dream had somehow bled into reality. Still, unease crept through me like fog. By the time I arrived at the marketing firm where I worked, I was on autopilot. I must have poured the same cup of coffee 3 times before actually drinking it. My coworker Elise popped her head over our cubicle divider, giving me that curious look she always had when she sensed gossip. "Rough night?" she asked, grinning. I forced a laugh. "You could say that." "What happened? Don't tell me you and Harper had too much wine again." The mention of Harper made my stomach twist. I hadn't told anyone about the warning or the call, but the words sat heavy on my tongue. Part of me wanted to tell Elise she was one of the few people at work I trusted, but I also knew how it would sound. A cashier told me not to go somewhere, and then a random voice on the phone repeated it? I'd sound insane. Instead, I said, "No. Just couldn't sleep. Weird dreams." Elise nodded knowingly. "Stress dreams? Welcome to adulthood." I tried to smile, but something about her easy laugh made me uneasy. Maybe I was just on edge. At lunch, I sat alone outside the office building, staring at my phone. Harper hadn't texted me since last night, which was odd for her. She was usually quick to check in if I bailed on our plans. I typed out a message. "Hey, how was dinner? Sorry I couldn't make it." Then deleted it before sending. Instead, I opened the local news app again. This time, There was something new. Electrical fire contained at Lakeview. Area substation minor damage. No injuries reported. Lakeview again. I felt my breath hitch. The article mentioned the outage had caused temporary blackouts in nearby businesses, including several establishments on Lakeview Road. One of those had to be the Lantern House. Maybe the restaurant had been affected. I spent the rest of the afternoon restless, replaying everything in my head. The whisper. The ash. The dream. None of it fit together neatly. When I clocked out that evening, I walked to the parking lot, planning to head straight home, but then something caught my eye. Across the street, near the coffee shop opposite my building, stood a woman I instantly recognized. The cashier. Clara. She wasn't wearing her uniform this time. Just a gray sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She looked terrified, scanning the crowd like she was being followed. "Clara!" I called out before I could stop myself. Her head snapped toward me. For a second, relief flashed across her face, then panic. She shook her head vigorously, mouthing no as she turned and hurried down the street. I dropped my bag and ran after her, weaving through the pedestrians, but by the time I reached the corner, she was gone, completely vanished. Breathing hard, I stood there, trying to catch my breath. Maybe she lived nearby. Maybe she'd quit her job and was just avoiding me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. I finally walked back to my car, my nerves frayed, my hands trembling as I unlocked the door. That's when I saw it, something wedged beneath my windshield wiper. A folded note. My heart pounded as I unfolded it with shaking hands. The handwriting was hurried, slanted, almost desperate. "If you love your daughter, stay away from the Lantern House." My knees nearly buckled. My vision blurred for a second as a cold wave of dread swept through me. This wasn't random anymore. Someone knew about Mia. I looked around, scanning the parking lot, but there was no one there. Just rows of cars gleaming under the late afternoon sun, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Later that day, I received a folded note under my windshield wiper. "If you love your daughter, stay away from the Lantern House." That note made my blood run cold. I stood frozen in the parking lot, gripping the crumpled paper in my hand, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The handwriting was jagged, uneven like whoever wrote it did so in a rush. "If you love your daughter, stay away from the Lantern House." The words burned into my mind. Whoever this was, they didn't just know about the restaurant, they knew about Mia. My sweet, innocent little girl. I shoved the note into my purse, scanning the parking lot again, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing. Just a mother pushing a stroller, a couple of office workers heading to their cars, and the low hum of traffic in the distance. Ordinary life. But nothing about this felt ordinary anymore. I climbed into my car, locking the doors immediately. My hands were trembling as I started the engine. I needed to see Mia. I didn't care if it meant being late for dinner or missing everything else, I just needed to make sure she was safe. The 15-minute drive to her school felt like an eternity. Every car that pulled up behind me made me tense. Every turn signal, every headlight in my rearview mirror looked suspicious. When I finally arrived, I parked hastily and ran inside, ignoring the curious look from the receptionist. Mia was still in the after-school art room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, painting something with glitter glue. When she looked up and saw me, her face lit up. "Mommy!" Relief flooded through me so hard I nearly cried. I knelt down and hugged her tight, breathing in her strawberry shampoo, grounding myself in her warmth and laughter. She giggled, squirming in my arms. "Mommy, you're squishing me!" I laughed weakly, brushing her hair back. "Sorry, baby. I just missed you." As we drove home, she talked non-stop about her birthday plans, about cake and balloons and her favorite dress. I nodded along, smiling, but my mind was elsewhere, spinning through every possibility. Who could know about Mia? Who would send that note? Once we got home, I sat her down with her dinner and slipped into the kitchen to call the police. The officer on the other end sounded polite but distracted. "Do you still have the note, ma'am?" "Yes," I said quickly. It was on my car. I think someone might be following me. It's about a restaurant. And my daughter. Was there a name on it? No, just a warning, he sighed lightly. Could be a prank. People do that kind of thing sometimes. Still, if you bring the note by the station, we'll file a report. His casual tone made my skin crawl. A prank? They mentioned my daughter's name. I understand, ma'am, but without a specific threat, there's not much we can do right now. We'll keep it on file, okay? I wanted to scream at him, but I knew it wouldn't help. I hung up and set the phone down, my hands shaking again. That's when I made a decision I was going to find Clara. She was the only link between all of this. After putting Mia to bed, I drove back to the toy store where it all started. The neon sign buzzed faintly as I pulled up, but the inside lights were dim. I tried the door, it was locked, even though the posted hours said they should still be open. I knocked, peering through the glass. A young man in a red apron appeared from the back and approached the door cautiously. I held up my hand. Hi, I'm looking for Clara. She was working here 2 nights ago. He frowned. Clara? She doesn't work here anymore. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? He shrugged. She quit. Last night, actually. Manager said she left in a hurry, didn't even pick up her last paycheck. Did she say why? He shook his head. No. She just looked scared. A chill spread through me. I thanked him and turned to leave. But something made me stop. As I glanced toward the darkened store window, I caught my own reflection, and behind me, across the street, stood a figure, a man. He wore a gray hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face, his posture still, deliberate, watching me. For a long moment, we just stared at each other through the reflection. Then he turned and disappeared into the alley. In the store's reflection window, I spotted someone watching me from across the street, a man in a gray hoodie. The man's stare was cold and deliberate, like he knew I was looking for something I shouldn't find. For a few seconds, I stood frozen in front of the toy store, staring into that glass reflection. The man in the gray hoodie had already disappeared down the alley, but the weight of his gaze still pressed against my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. Maybe it was just a random passerby, I told myself, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. He hadn't just looked at me, he had been watching. I turned quickly, scanning the empty street. Nothing. The soft buzz of the streetlights was the only sound. I swallowed hard, unlocked my car, and slid inside, locking the doors as soon as I did. My fingers trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. I glanced in the mirrors, no one behind me, no one walking past. Still, that same tight feeling in my chest wouldn't ease. I started the car and pulled out of the lot, my eyes flicking constantly to the rear-view mirror. Every pair of headlights made my stomach twist. Halfway home, I thought I saw a gray blur dart across a side street behind me. I slammed on the brakes, my pulse spiking, but when I looked again, there was nothing there. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the relief of being home was short-lived. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind outside felt heavy. I took a deep breath and went inside, locking the door behind me. Mia was asleep on the couch, her little hand curled around her stuffed bunny. Her soft breathing was the only sound in the house. Seeing her safe made something in me unclench. I brushed a strand of hair off her forehead, then walked through the house checking every window and door, all locked, curtains drawn. Everything seemed normal. I poured myself a glass of water and tried to calm down, but my nerves were on edge. Every creak of the house sounded louder than usual. I kept glancing at the window, half expecting to see that gray hoodie staring back at me from the darkness. I decided to stay awake for a while, just to make sure. I turned on the porch light and sat by the living room window, pretending to scroll through my phone. The hours dragged by. Midnight came and went, the world outside silent. Eventually, exhaustion started to blur my vision. Then I heard it. A faint crunch like a footstep. My heart skipped. I turned off the lamp and moved closer to the window, careful not to make a sound. Another step, closer this time. I peered through the blinds, and my breath caught. Someone was standing near the end of the driveway, the gray hoodie. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the house. I ducked down instantly, trying to stay out of sight. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone as I dialed 911. The dispatcher's calm voice was the only thing keeping me steady. "Stay inside, ma'am. Officers are on the way." I waited, barely breathing. The man didn't move for what felt like forever. Then, just as the sound of approaching sirens echoed faintly in the distance, he turned and disappeared into the trees. When the police arrived, they searched the area but found nothing. No footprints on the driveway, no tire marks, no sign of anyone lurking around. One of the officers, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes, tried to reassure me. "Probably just a neighbor, a kid messing around. Halloween's coming up, people pull stunts like that." I wanted to believe him, but when I stepped outside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the soft glow of the porch light, faint footprints trailed from the edge of the woods to the side of my house. They were real fresh in the damp grass. The officer frowned, crouching down to look at them. "Could be animal tracks," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. After they left, I couldn't sleep. I checked every lock again, every window, even propped a chair under the front door handle. My nerves were raw, my mind racing. At sunrise, I stepped outside to grab the morning paper, and that's when I saw it. Tucked neatly inside my mailbox was another folded note. This time, it only had 2 words. "You were warned." My hands shook so hard the paper fluttered to the ground. I stared down the quiet street, the wind whispering through the trees. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about a restaurant anymore. Inside my mailbox the next morning, I found another note. "You were warned." Every fiber of my being told me to stay home, but Harper wouldn't stop calling about our dinner plans. The second note had turned my blood to ice. I didn't even sleep that night. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the front door like it might burst open at any moment. Every sound outside made me flinch: the groan of tree branches, a dog barking down the street, the faint hum of a passing car. I kept replaying the same questions in my mind. Who were they? What did they want from me? And most terrifying of all, why did it involve my daughter? By morning, my nerves were shot. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, and my coffee went cold before I could drink half of it. I wanted to call Harper, tell her everything, the warnings, the man in the hoodie, the notes, but every time I picked up my phone, I hesitated. Harper was the practical one. She'd tell me I was overreacting, that stress and sleep deprivation were twisting my mind. Around noon, my phone rang again. It was her. "Dana, you disappeared last night. You okay?" Her cheerful voice felt strangely jarring against the heavy silence of my house. "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "Sorry, I got caught up with Mia's school stuff. I didn't mean to worry you." "Well, you missed out. The restaurant was amazing. You have to come tonight. They're having a soft reopening after the power outage." "I already made reservations for us, my treat." I froze. "Tonight?" "Yep. Come on, you need a break. You've been tense for weeks." I glanced toward the kitchen counter, where both notes still lay unfolded. "Harper, I don't think I should. Something feels off." "Off? Dana, it's a restaurant, not a haunted house," she said with a laugh. "You can't live in fear of some weird prank." She didn't get it, and maybe she couldn't. I took a breath, trying to sound casual. "I'll think about it, okay?" After we hung up, I spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the house, torn between dread and guilt. Harper had been through a lot after her divorce. She'd taken the breakup hard, and our dinners were her way of staying connected. Canceling again would crush her. By late afternoon, I finally decided on a compromise. I'd meet her there, but I wouldn't go inside right away. I'd drive by, see if anything seemed strange, and if it did, I'd leave. Simple. Safe. Before heading out, I made sure Mia would be okay. I called Rachel, our regular babysitter, to come by for a few hours. She was a sweet college student who adored Mia, and I trusted her completely. When she arrived, I double-checked the doors and windows one more time. "Don't answer the door for anyone," I told her firmly. "Even if they say they know me." Rachel nodded, looking a little puzzled. "Everything okay, Miss Collins?" "Yeah," I lied. just being careful. I hugged Mia tight before leaving. She smelled like sugar cookies and crayons, innocence and comfort wrapped in one small human being. I love you, baby, I whispered. Love you too, Mommy, she said, waving as I backed down the driveway. The drive to the lantern house was quiet, the sunset bleeding red and gold across the horizon. I kept my eyes on the road, but my hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. The GPS stuttered twice, rerouting itself even though the address hadn't changed. Static filled the speakers briefly, then faded. Great, I muttered, glancing at the flickering screen. As I neared Lakeview Road, the air grew heavier. The woods on both sides of the highway seemed darker than usual, almost unnaturally so. Then, just as I rounded a bend, something darted across the road. I slammed on the brakes, heart leaping into my throat. A figure, pale, frantic, was waving her arms wildly in the middle of the road. The headlights illuminated her face for only a second, but it was enough. It was Clara, the cashier. She was screaming something I couldn't hear, her expression filled with pure terror. When I neared the restaurant, my headlights caught a figure running into the woods. It was the same cashier, waving frantically at my car. I slammed on the brakes and ran toward her, but she looked terrified beyond words. My car screeched to a stop, tires squealing against the pavement. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out every other sound. I flung open the door and stepped into the cool night air, my breath coming fast. The headlights illuminated the edge of the woods, and there she was, Clara. Her face was pale and streaked with dirt, her hair tangled, her eyes wide with panic. Clara, I called, taking a few steps toward her. What's going on? Why are you here? She looked over her shoulder, trembling, her chest heaving like she'd been running for miles. You shouldn't be here, she whispered hoarsely. They're watching. Who's watching? I asked, trying to close the distance between us. She shook her head furiously. You have to leave, Dana. Now. The way she said my name made my stomach twist. How do you know who I am? I saw your name on the credit card, she said quickly, glancing around as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows. After you left the store, I tried to warn you again, but they were already watching you. I froze. Who's they? Before she could answer, the distant roar of an engine echoed from down the road. Clara's eyes went wide with terror. It's them. Headlights appeared in the distance, bright, cutting through the dark as a black SUV sped toward us. Clara grabbed my arm. Go! You can't let them see you with me. What are you talking about? Who are they? I demanded, but she was already backing away. The SUV's headlights grew larger, brighter. I instinctively ducked behind my car, heart hammering. The vehicle slowed as it neared the restaurant's entrance, its tinted windows reflecting the lantern-lit sign. Clara took off running toward the woods. Don't go in there tonight, she shouted one last time before vanishing into the trees. I crouched low, peering over the hood as the SUV pulled into the restaurant's parking lot. Two men stepped out, dressed in dark clothing. They didn't look like waiters or patrons. One of them carried something wrapped in black cloth. The other kept glancing over his shoulder, scanning the road. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. The restaurant itself glowed warmly in the distance, music, laughter, clinking glasses. It looked normal, peaceful even. But the sight of those men made the air feel poisoned. The two of them walked toward the side door of the restaurant, where a man in a white chef's coat met them. They exchanged a few words, then the chef took whatever they were holding and disappeared inside. The men returned to the SUV. Curiosity wrestled with fear inside me. What had they delivered? Why was Clara so terrified of this place? The SUV lingered for a few minutes, idling with its headlights off. I ducked lower, my pulse thudding in my ears. Finally, the driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She was tall, wearing a blazer over black jeans, her hair pulled neatly into a bun. The light from the restaurant sign flickered across her face, and I felt my entire body go still. It was Elise, my coworker. I blinked, certain I was mistaken. But no, it was definitely her. Elise, The same woman who sat across from me every day, laughing about office gossip, complaining about deadlines. What the hell was she doing here? She handed something small to one of the men, something that looked like a phone or a flash drive, and then said something I couldn't hear. The man nodded, and they both got back into the SUV. The vehicle backed out slowly, its headlights briefly sweeping across the woods where Clara had disappeared. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't move. I was too stunned. When the SUV passed my car, I ducked down again, heart pounding so violently it hurt. I waited until the sound of the engine faded completely before daring to lift my head. The night was silent again. I turned toward the glowing restaurant sign in the distance, every nerve in my body buzzing. Elise had been there. Clara was hiding. The warnings weren't random. Something was happening at the lantern house, something dark. The SUV turned, and for a brief second, I saw the driver's face. It was Elise, my coworker. My mind spun. Why would Elise be meeting people secretly at the restaurant? I sat motionless in my car for what felt like forever, my fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. My coworker Elise had just driven off from a secret meeting behind the lantern house. None of it made sense. Elise wasn't the kind of person to get mixed up in shady things. She was sharp, funny, always the first to volunteer for charity drives at work. But what I'd just seen didn't look like charity. It looked like something out of a crime show. I knew I should have gone home, called the police, done something normal. But something stronger took over: curiosity, dread, the need to know what was really happening. Before I could talk myself out of it, I started the car and pulled out onto the road, headlights dimmed, following the SUV at a cautious distance. Elise drove fast but steady, heading away from the main road toward the outskirts of town. The farther we went, the fewer streetlights there were. Eventually the road narrowed into a gravel path lined with trees. My stomach twisted as I recognized the area. An old motel sat abandoned out here, a relic from decades ago before the highway bypassed it. I hadn't seen it in years. Sure enough, Elise turned into the cracked parking lot, her SUV's lights cutting across the faded sign, Lakeview Motel. The place was dead quiet, the only sound the crunch of tires over gravel. I parked a distance away, behind a cluster of trees, and killed my engine. My hands trembled as I watched her step out. 2 other cars were already there, beat-up sedans with tinted windows. Elise walked toward one of the rooms, where a dim light glowed through the curtains. She knocked twice, then entered. Every instinct told me to leave. But instead, I slipped out of my car and crept closer, my shoes crunching softly on the ground. I pressed myself against the cold wall just beneath the window and dared to peek through a small gap in the curtain. What I saw made my stomach lurch. Inside, a group of people sat around a long table littered with papers, photographs, and what looked like surveillance maps. A few laptops glowed, illuminating faces that were half shrouded in shadow. Elise sat near the end, speaking quietly with a man in a dark suit. I couldn't hear much, but, every so often, words cut through the muffled noise: shipment, timing, cleanup. Then, something else caught my eye. On the table were photographs. At first I couldn't tell what they were, but then I saw it. My house, my car, Mia's school. My chest tightened. I scanned further. There was me, walking to my office building, carrying my purse. Another photo showed Mia and me in our front yard, her holding a pink balloon. My knees went weak. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. Why did they have pictures of us? As I struggled to make sense of it, movement flickered at the corner of my vision. A shadow shifted beside me, followed by a light tap on my shoulder. My whole body jolted. I turned, ready to scream, only to find myself staring into a familiar face. It was Clara. "Don't make a sound," she hissed, pulling me back from the window. Her eyes were wide, her breathing ragged. "You shouldn't have followed them," I whispered. "What is this? What are they doing in there?" Clara glanced toward the door nervously. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me." She hesitated, then whispered, "They're not who you think they are. That restaurant, it's a front. They move money, people, information. Elise works for them. She's dangerous." My stomach dropped. "How do you know all this?" I used to work for them, she said quietly. Before I found out what they were really doing, I could barely breathe. The idea that Elise, my coworker, someone I saw every single day, was involved in something criminal felt surreal. What do they want with me? I whispered. Clara's eyes softened. Because you're connected. Your husband. He knew something about them before he died. They think he told you. The air left my lungs. My husband's death had been ruled an accident, a car crash on a rainy night 3 years ago, but hearing her say that, footsteps suddenly echoed from inside the room. Clara's hand gripped my arm tightly. They know someone's here, she whispered. We turned toward the dark parking lot, my pulse thundering. Before I could leave, a hand grabbed my shoulder. It was the cashier again. The cashier whispered, "You're not supposed to see this." The cashier pulled me into hiding as footsteps echoed through the hallway. Clara's grip was firm, her eyes wild with fear. She yanked me around the corner of the motel, pressing her finger to her lips. The door to the room we'd just been peeking into creaked open, and I heard the muffled sound of men's voices spilling out into the night air. "Check around," one of them barked. "Someone's out there." My pulse thundered in my ears. Clara crouched low, motioning for me to follow. We crept along the wall, our steps silent on the cracked concrete. The only light came from a flickering bulb above one of the doors, casting everything in sickly yellow shadows. I risked a glance back. 2 men stepped out of the meeting room, both dressed in black jackets. One carried a flashlight, the beam cutting across the parking lot. "Over there," he muttered, moving toward the trees where I'd parked my car. Clara grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the far end of the motel. We ducked behind a dumpster, the smell of old trash and oil burning my throat. I could hear my heart beat, feel the weight of every second dragging by. After what felt like an eternity, the men moved farther away, their footsteps fading. I finally exhaled. "Clara," I whispered, "what is this? Who are these people?" She looked at me, her face pale but resolute. "They're part of something bigger than you think. The Lantern House isn't just a restaurant, it's a front. They're laundering money, moving stolen goods, and covering it up with fake investors and charity events." My mind struggled to keep up. "And Elise?" Clara nodded grimly. "She's their point of contact inside. They're your company. She funnels them information, hides transactions. She's been under investigation, but she's protected by powerful people." I felt my stomach twist. Elise, the woman who laughed about office potlucks and talked about her weekend hikes, was a criminal? But why me? Clara hesitated. "Your husband worked for them. He found out about the laundering years ago, but he was planning to go to the police. They made it look like an accident. Now they think he passed evidence to you before he died." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "That's impossible," I whispered. He never said anything. I didn't know." Clara looked down. "Maybe you didn't. But they don't believe that. They've been watching you, following you. That's why I tried to warn you at the store. When they realized I talked to you, I had to run." I pressed a shaking hand to my forehead, trying to process everything. "So that's why Elise was there. She's one of them." Clara nodded. "And if they think you're involved, they won't stop until they're sure you're not a threat." A cold dread settled in my chest. I had to get home to Mia. "I need to go," I said, my voice breaking. "My daughter's home with the babysitter. If they've been watching me," Clara grabbed my arm. "Wait, you can't just drive back. They might be tracking your car or your phone." I shook my head, panic surging. "I don't care. I just need to get to her." She hesitated for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. But take my route. There's a back road through the woods that leads to the highway. It'll take longer, but they won't find you." We slipped out from behind the dumpster, moving toward the back of the motel. The air felt thicker now, heavy with tension. I could still hear faint voices somewhere nearby. As we approached the edge of the lot, I spotted my car in the distance, still parked, untouched. "Almost there, Clara," whispered. But before we could take another step, bright light flooded the alleyway. The low rumble of an engine followed, and I froze. A black SUV blocked the exit, headlights blazing directly into our faces. My blood turned to ice. The driver's door opened, and a familiar silhouette stepped out. It was Elise. Her expression was calm, almost amused. As she raised her hand, and in it, I saw something small and rectangular. My phone. "Looking for this?" she said coolly. "You've been busy, Dana." As we sneaked toward my car, the SUV's headlights flared to life, blocking our path. Elise stepped out, smiling darkly, holding my phone in her hand. Elise stepped out of the SUV, smiling darkly, holding my phone in her hand. For a moment the world seemed to freeze around me. The glare from the SUV's headlights burned into my eyes, forcing me to squint, but I could still see her Elise standing there so casually, like we were just coworkers meeting for lunch. Only now, her smile wasn't friendly. It was sharp, cold, almost mocking. "Dana," she said smoothly, her voice cutting through the air like glass. "You have no idea how much trouble you've caused by being nosy." Clara stiffened beside me, her grip tightening on my arm. "We need to move," she whispered under her breath. Elise tilted her head, that smug smile still fixed on her face. "Clara, you just don't learn, do you? You were supposed to disappear quietly." "Leave her out of this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Whatever this is, I don't care. Just stay away from my daughter." At the mention of Mia, Elise's expression flickered, something dark crossed her eyes. "Your daughter?" she repeated softly. "Oh, Dana, this isn't about her. This is about you and your late husband." My breath caught. "What about him?" Elise stepped closer, her heels crunching against the gravel. "You really don't know, do you? He found out what we were doing. He tried to expose us, but accidents happen. Tragic, really." Her words slammed into me like a physical blow. My vision blurred. "You killed him?" Elise's smile widened slightly. "I didn't say that, but he was reckless like you. Always asking questions." She raised my phone, turning it in her hand. "You've been making calls, looking things up. You think we don't notice?" Clara moved in front of me, her voice trembling but defiant. "You can't silence everyone, Elise. It's over." Elise laughed. A low, chilling sound. "Over? Sweetheart, we own half this town. No one's going to believe you." The two men from the motel appeared beside the SUV, moving like shadows. One of them reached for something beneath his jacket. My pulse spiked. Clara pushed me back. "Run," she whispered. I didn't move at first. I was too stunned, too frozen in fear. But when Elise nodded toward her men, instinct finally took over. Clara shoved me hard, yelling, "Go!" And I bolted toward the woods behind the motel. Branches snapped beneath my feet, thorns scratching at my arms as I ran. The air was thick and damp, each breath burning in my chest. Behind me, I heard shouting Elise, ordering her men to follow. I didn't dare look back. The darkness swallowed everything around me. All I could think about was Mia. I had to get home. I had to reach her before they did. I stumbled onto a dirt path, spotting the faint glimmer of my car through the trees. Clara appeared beside me, panting, her face pale and streaked with mud. "Come on," she urged. We reached the car and threw ourselves inside. My hands fumbled for the keys, shaking so badly I nearly dropped them. The engine roared to life just as headlights flashed behind us again. "Go!" Clara screamed. Gravel sprayed as I slammed the gas pedal. The SUV burst from the trees, its lights blinding in the rearview mirror. My tires screeched as I swerved onto the main road. "They're following us!" I cried. "Take the long way home," Clara shouted. "Lose them near the river bridge." The chase felt endless, every turn, every curve. The SUV stayed close behind. Finally, when I hit the bridge, I cut the headlights and veered sharply onto a narrow side road. The SUV barreled past, its engine fading into the distance. We sat in silence, breathless, trembling. Clara turned to me, her eyes fierce. "You need to get to your daughter. Now." I nodded, my chest tight with dread. I sped through the dark streets, praying Mia was still safe. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the house was dark. Too dark. Mia! I shouted, running to the door. It was unlocked. My stomach dropped. Inside, everything looked wrong. The living room lights were off, the curtains drawn, the air thick and still. Rachel? I called. Mia? No answer. Then I saw her, Rachel, the babysitter, lying on the floor near the kitchen, unconscious, a bruise forming on her temple. I dropped to my knees beside her, shaking her gently. Rachel, what happened? Her eyes fluttered open weakly. Her voice was barely a whisper. She said she was your coworker. She came to pick up Mia. My vision went white with panic. Elise, I breathed. Rachel nodded weakly before slipping back into unconsciousness. Mia, I whispered, my voice breaking. At home, the lights were off, and the front door was ajar. Inside, the babysitter was unconscious, and Mia was missing. I screamed my daughter's name until my throat burned. Mia. My voice echoed through the house, raw and frantic. I tore through every room, her bedroom, the bathroom, even the closets, nothing. Her favorite blanket lay on the floor near the stairs, the one she never slept without. My heart pounded in my chest so violently it hurt. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. My baby was gone. I ran back to Rachel, who was still half conscious on the kitchen floor. What did she look like? What did the woman look like? Rachel groaned, clutching her head. I told her you'd be home soon. She said you sent her. Her voice was weak, trembling. She had short hair, maybe 30s. She knew your name. My heart sank. Did she say her name? Elise. She whispered, barely audible. I staggered backward, my knees threatening to give out. It was like my worst nightmare had materialized right in front of me. Elise had my daughter. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my fingers fumbling so badly I nearly dropped it. My daughter's been taken, I choked out. Her name is Mia Collins. She's 8 years old. Please, you have to help me. The dispatcher's calm voice barely registered through my panic. Ma'am, slow down. Do you know who took her? Yes, I cried. Her name is Elise. She's my coworker. Please, she's dangerous. Officers are being dispatched to your address now. Stay on the line, ma'am. But I didn't stay on the line. I couldn't. I hung up, grabbed my car keys and bolted for the door. Every instinct in my body screamed that I didn't have time to wait for help. If Elise had gone through the trouble of staging everything, she wasn't planning to keep Mia around long. As I rushed outside, headlights flashed across my driveway. For a split second, terror gripped me until the driver's side door opened and Clara stepped out. Dana, she shouted. I've been tracking her. I ran to her, barely able to form words. She took Mia, Elise took her. Clara nodded, her expression grim. I know. I intercepted a message. They're moving locations tonight. What does that mean? It means she's taking your daughter somewhere they won't find her, Clara said, her voice low. But I think I know where. She held up a small tracking device attached to her phone. I managed to clone the signal from Elise's SUV before we escaped the motel. She's still broadcasting. Where is she? I demanded. Clara's eyes flicked to the screen, the faint glow illuminating her face. Lakeview. Near the restaurant. The Lantern House? I whispered, disbelief tightening my chest. Clara nodded. There's a property behind it, a private lot by the water. They use it for meetings. I didn't hesitate. Then that's where we're going. We sped through the dark streets, the city fading behind us. The road to Lakeview felt endless, every mile heavier than the last. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The thought of Mia alone with Elise, of her being afraid and calling for me, made my vision blur. When we reached the lake, fog drifted over the road, thick and low. The familiar sign for the Lantern House glowed faintly in the distance, but unlike before, the restaurant was dark. No music, no laughter, just a flickering light in one of the upper windows. Stay quiet, Clara murmured as we pulled off the road. We crept toward the building, every shadow feeling alive. The air smelled faintly of smoke and damp earth. My entire body was shaking, but I forced myself to move forward. We stopped behind a row of bushes overlooking the back of the property. That's when I saw it, Elise's SUV parked near a service door. The driver's side window was down. Clara zoomed in on her phone screen. Her tracker's still active. She's inside. I swallowed hard, my heart slamming against my ribs. Then so is Mia. Clara glanced at me. Are you sure you're ready for this? No, I admitted, my voice trembling. But I'm not leaving without her. We crept closer, our footsteps muffled by the grass. The building loomed over us, silent and cold. I could see faint movement through one of the second-story windows, a small shape tied to a chair, her head drooping forward. My breath caught in my throat. Mia, I whispered. Through an upstairs window, I spotted Mia tied to a chair. I didn't care about the danger anymore. I was going to get my daughter back. The moment I saw her through that upstairs window, everything else disappeared, the fear, the doubt, even the reason. All I could think about was Mia. My baby was in there, tied up and terrified, and nothing on this earth was going to stop me from reaching her. Clara grabbed my arm, whispering urgently, Dana, slow down. We have to be careful, they could be armed. I don't care, I hissed. That's my daughter. Clara's eyes darted toward the building. We'll get her out, but if they catch you, they'll use her against you. Let me go first. I shook my head. No, I'm not hiding anymore. The back door of the lantern house was slightly ajar, light spilling out onto the damp grass. We slipped inside, moving quietly through the dark kitchen. The smell of stale food and cleaning chemicals filled the air. Everything looked abandoned, tables overturned, dishes left half-washed, chairs stacked in corners. It didn't look like a restaurant anymore. It looked like a hideout. From upstairs, faint voices drifted down Elise's cold, sharp tone and a man's deeper one. I couldn't make out the words, but I heard something that froze me in place. Mia's small, frightened whimper. Clara's expression hardened. She's in the manager's office, top of the stairs. I spotted a metal knife lying near the sink and grabbed it, my hands trembling. If anyone tries to stop me, I swear, Dana, Clara said softly, gripping my shoulder. Stay quiet, stay focused. We crept up the staircase, each step creaking under our feet. The voices grew clearer. Elise was pacing. No, she doesn't know anything, she snapped. But once they find out she came here, we're done. We need to leave tonight. The man answered in a low growl. And the kid? My blood ran cold. We'll drop her at the pier when we're finished. Make it look like she wandered off, Elise said flatly. I didn't wait another second. I pushed the office door open so hard it slammed against the wall. Elise whirled around, her eyes going wide. Mia was tied to a chair in the corner, a strip of duct tape across her mouth, tears streaking her face. Mommy! She tried to scream through the tape. Let her go, I shouted, brandishing the knife. Elise's expression shifted from surprise to something cruelly amused. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Clara stepped in behind me. It's over, Elise. The feds are already on to you. Elise smirked. You think the feds scare me? They work with us. I moved closer. Every nerve in my body burning. You're not touching my daughter. Elise reached behind her and pulled a gun from her waistband, pointing it directly at me. You're too late, Dana. You should have stayed ignorant. I froze, staring down the barrel, but Clara suddenly lunged forward, knocking Elise's arm aside. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the small room. The bullet tore through the drywall inches from my head. Run! Clara yelled. I dove toward Mia, slicing through the rope with the knife. She fell into my arms, sobbing uncontrollably. It's okay, baby, I've got you, I whispered, clutching her tight. Elise recovered quickly, fury twisting her features. She aimed the gun again. You're not leaving! Before she could fire, flashing red and blue lights cut through the windows. Sirens blared outside. Clara ducked, pulling me and Mia toward the side door. How did they know? I gasped. Clara gave me a tight smile. I sent a message to a contact before we came in. You're not the only one with connections. We ran down the stairs as the sound of shouting erupted above us. Elise screamed in rage, followed by the heavy pounding of boots. I pushed open the back door just as a gunshot echoed through the hall. Mia screamed, burying her face in my shoulder. I turned, terrified that Clara had been hit, but she was still on her feet, though pale and trembling. "Keep moving!" she shouted, urging me toward the tree line. The police swarmed the building moments later, their flashlights slicing through the darkness, voices yelling commands. I turned to look back one last time, just in time to see Elise appear in the doorway, her gun raised, eyes blazing with hatred. Then, suddenly another gunshot. Elise's body jerked backward, the weapon clattering to the floor. Clara stood behind her, holding a smoking gun, her expression unreadable. As Elise raised the gun again, a shot rang out, but it wasn't from her. When the gunfire stopped, Elise lay unconscious on the floor. Lorna had saved us. For a long, paralyzed second, all I could hear was the ringing in my ears and Mia's sobs muffled against my shoulder. The world seemed frozen, the flashing blue and red lights outside blurring together like colors in a nightmare. Elise lay on the ground, motionless, her gun kicked away by an officer who had rushed in after the final shot. I couldn't move. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, clutching Mia tightly as if letting go would make her vanish again. "Dana, it's okay." "Clara, no," Lorna, as she would later tell me her real name, said softly, lowering the weapon. Her hands were steady, her expression calm, but her eyes were full of something I hadn't seen before: sorrow. Police officers swarmed through the building, shouting commands, securing the suspects, handcuffing the two men I'd seen at the motel. It was chaos: footsteps, radios crackling, the sound of doors being kicked open. But through it all, one thing was clear. It was over. A detective knelt beside me, speaking gently. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" I shook my head, unable to form words. "My daughter," was all I could manage. They led us outside, into the cool night air. Mia clung to me, trembling but safe. I wrapped her in my jacket, kissing her forehead again and again, whispering, "You're okay, baby. You're safe now." Lorna followed us out, escorted by an officer. I turned to her, my voice shaking. "You saved us. Twice." She gave a faint smile. "I couldn't let them hurt you. Or her." I frowned. Your name's not Clara, is it?" She shook her head. "No, Lorna Reyes. I used to work for them, years ago, before I went undercover. I've been trying to take them down ever since." It all clicked: the warnings, the fear in her eyes, her constant running. She wasn't just a frightened cashier, she was risking her life to expose the people behind the Lantern House. The detective approached, overhearing us. "She's telling the truth," he said. "Agent Reyes has been working with our federal task force for months. Elise and her partners were part of an interstate laundering ring. You just stumbled into the middle of it." I looked at Lorna in disbelief. You were undercover this whole time?" She nodded. "When you came into the store, I recognized your name. I didn't expect you to be connected, but once I realized who your husband was, I knew you were in danger. He tried to warn people too. He was a good man." Tears welled in my eyes. "He died trying to protect us, didn't he?" She looked down. "Yes, and you almost did the same, but you were brave. You listened when it mattered." Mia stirred in my arms, looking up at Lorna sleepily. "You're the lady from the store," she murmured. Lorna smiled softly. "That's right, sweetheart." By dawn, the parking lot was filled with police vehicles and flashing lights. Elise and the other suspects were loaded into separate cars. As they drove away, I watched Elise's pale face through the window, her expression hollow, all the smugness gone. When it was finally over, I sat on the curb with Mia, asleep against my chest. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving only exhaustion and the dull ache of everything that had happened. Lorna approached one last time, holding a folded piece of paper. "I have to go," she said quietly. "But if you ever need me, this will reach me." Before I could respond, she placed the note in my hand and turned to leave, her silhouette fading into the mist that hung over the lake. I unfolded the paper, It contained just 2 words. You listened. Months later, the lantern house was demolished. The papers called it one of the biggest corruption cases in the state's history. Elise and her partners went to prison, and my husband's name was finally cleared. Life didn't return to normal, not really, but it grew quieter, softer. Mia smiled again. I opened a small toy store downtown, one that sold handmade gifts and wooden lanterns. I called it the Lantern's Light. It was my way of turning something dark into something beautiful. Sometimes, when I close up the shop at night, I still hear a whisper in my head, Lorna's voice, steady and urgent. Don't go there tonight. And every time I hear it, I turn around and listen, just in case the universe is trying to save me again. Every time I hear a whisper in a crowded store, I still turn around just in case it's another warning I can't afford to ignore.